DSLR camera mechanics for Photo 130. So if you unbox your camera and you have it sitting next to you, I think that'll be helpful for this first presentation. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. It'll show us a display of what your DSLR camera will look like along with the named buttons for that. Okay, just kidding. If you're recently unboxed your camera, have never touched it before, this may be how you are currently referencing some of the buttons that are available. We will not be referring to them as the switchy tool, whatchamacallits, or any of these other things on as reference. I saw this on the internet and made me giggle. I figured I'd throw this into the presentation just to start off the bat. But we're going to go ahead and get going on that. But like I said, I would recommend, if you don't have it out, pause this quick presentation, pull out your DSLR camera so you can follow along and find the corresponding buttons and where they are on your camera. So for the camera mechanics, this is just a general display of the back of a DSLR camera. As this is an intro to photo course, we will not be covering anything and everything that these can do, but there is a wide range, and again, your camera may not look exactly like this. It will look similar, however. So I think it's important to take a look at some of the buttons that we'll be definitely using throughout the course and that you'll be using afterwards as well. So if we take just to go ahead and pick on some of the areas that we will definitely be using, you see on the back here, it's not listed, but this is the LCD screen. All of your cameras that are current and up to date will likely have one of these. You also have many options on what display menus you want to show up on the back. If you want to use this as a purely viewing area, you can have that with a live view availability as well, so you can live see your images instead of looking through the viewfinder, which is located right here where you'd put your eye up to. There's also an option within the menu of your camera to have this live view screen time out. I know most factory settings are set to about 30 seconds. For myself, I know that this is not long enough if I'm setting up perhaps a timer on my camera, pressing record, and then I want to be able to review my images without it timing out. So you have the opportunity to change how long this LCD screen is lit up. Again, 30 seconds seems to be industry standard for a preset, but I think you can actually go up to anywhere until 10 minutes or until you manually turn it off. This is also where you're going to be viewing your image settings that you choose for your photos. So you'll have displayed up there your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed, among other things. To highlight some of the other stuff that is on here, you see that this right here is the mode dial. If you take a look at here, we'll be using specifically the M that of course is at the back of the dial where it's positioned in this image. Your camera will be set to M or manual for the entirety of all of your projects. You see that the shutter release button is the button that you use to take your pictures or to start your video control as well. The control dial, they have it designated as right here. Some of your cameras will have one right about here on the back where you'd access with your right thumb, and some actually also have a control dial on the front. So you see that this is not all inclusive of all camera makes and models. Yours is going to be located wherever it is on your camera and may be different from this design. Another button that we see on here is reference white balance. Some cameras have this. Some will just say WB. WB refers to white balance, and that comes in play with the quality of light that your camera is using. For the purpose of this course, you can go ahead and select that to auto. Since we'll be using the Camera Raw plugin, that is going to be one of the quickest and easiest changes that you can make, and that may be true to form with how you shot it, or you may stylistically choose another one to drive the narrative of your photo. Right below that, we see AF, spot selection. AF on your camera, you get used to understanding the acronyms, is autofocus. Again, autofocus is perfectly suitable for this course. If you want to learn specifically and only do manual focus, that's also up to you as well. But for autofocus, the generalized suggestion where people should start is choosing a single point focus. This camera model happens to have a button on the back. Yours will no doubt have an option within the menu where you can select a single point or multiple points as well. You get right below that, you see that this camera actually has two buttons for white balance. This one also lets you select and go through and select a specific type of lighting you may be shooting in. Again, you may go ahead and select auto for the purpose of this course because we'll have first point of contact in the software that we'll be using. It'll be the availability to edit that. The OK button is right below. And we'll move back on down to focusing mode. This comes to play closely with the auto focus spot selection as well for how you want to focus. Some of your cameras will have this, some will not. If we go down a little bit further, actually skipping metering pattern because we won't be using that often. It's a little advanced for this course. We go into ISO setting, and that'll be really, really important. I tend to encourage, if you have the option, to keep the ISO as low as possible. Let's say staying away from the 4-digit settings. So 800 and below typically is for situations that have quality light. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit further down. So the ISO setting, some of yours will be available right here. You can also quick access those within the menu. Some of your ISO availability or change options will be on these dials up here. So again, if you have your camera out in front of you, which I would suggest, find out where those are located on your specific model. A lot of cameras aren't going to have the busy light, and that's okay. We can go ahead and skip over on that. Over here on the left, there's an info button. Almost all cameras will have this. Yours may be located somewhere else. Depending on the factory defaults or if you're able to set the info that shows up, this is going to be maybe something that you can personalize and have set specifically for what you want to look at. Menu on and off, again, that will pop up the internal menu. We're able to access things such as autofocus, image quality, things of the like that would be within the digital menu, and I keep circling around here on the LCD screen on your camera. Delete image, we all know what that looks like. My suggestion is to not delete images off of your camera. Delete them off your laptop once you transfer them. And why? Here is my why. You're taking the, I guess, the assumption of what the LCD screen is telling you is true to form, and essentially you're staring at a like 1.5 by 2.5 tiny screen as compared to the size of your laptop. So I just encourage you not to use the delete image. Wait until you get a chance to transfer your images off the SD card onto your laptop, which kind of negates the image review button up here. That's, again, an option. That is also something that uses up a lot of battery power. So again, my suggestion, don't image review, don't delete image. As a quick reference, sure, take a look at them, but they also eat up your battery life. And then again, you're making a judgment call off of this small LCD screen on the back of your camera. Above there is a button called flash mode. I make the recommendation to my students to turn off your flash. And that is because I recommend shooting in, it doesn't have to be natural light, but quality and sufficient light for your images, so you're able to keep your ISO, which we'll talk about in a little bit, as low as possible. Alright, from here we're going to go ahead and take a look at the front of your camera because we covered most of the basics. Again, later down the course, if you're curious what other things are doing, I think some intrinsic motivation to find those out, but we just don't want to do overkill for the basics of the camera mechanics. Going to the front of the camera so we can take a look down. You see this is facing down. We see a couple other parts, a lot smaller menu than what we were previously looking at. Again, up on top we see mode dial, something simple enough as a neck strap lug. If you recently unboxed a camera and you do not have a neck strap included, or if you do, make sure you put that on right away just for the safety and security of your equipment that you're working with. This is the flash hot shoe we see right down in the center. If you have an external flash that you want to use as an attachment, definitely an option, but above and beyond the level of what we do in this course. But this is where you'd connect it. And the viewfinder eyepiece, where you put your eye up to. If you are a glasses wearer, you will most likely have to take your glasses off to properly access this, since you typically have to be pressed up pretty tight against it. Over here on the top, you see that there's a LCD control panel, or rather a plate. The majority of entry-level cameras do not have this listed out there. I know, for example, the old D80, that does include that panel up on top. Over here again, the other neck strap lug. This is a little bit kind of simplicity overkill where they're listed. Main command dial. Again, yours may be located. Typically, it's wherever your thumb or index finger can access it. And if you're left-handed, I apologize. All DSLR cameras are more or less designed for right-handed people. So that's where you see the majority of them are located on the right side. Again, that shutter release, that's the button you'll be pressing to capture your images as you're going about. A little bit of information on the very front, and this isn't necessarily the body of your camera, but the lenses that you are attaching. You see on here we have the zoom ring, and that'll be when you go ahead and change your focal length and where you're zooming in on your image. And then something separate is the focus ring. These are separate and distinctly different. So the zoom will get you to a point where you want to capture in or tightly focus in the composition of your image. You don't have to zoom at all if it suits your image. Sometimes literally stepping forward or stepping back results in, I guess, a better outcome. The focus ring will fine-tune your focus. Keep in mind, if you have the autofocus feature on your camera, it may fight against this once you've set it. So that's something I think we'll get into in the next couple slides, again, talking about autofocus versus manual focus, and then these adjustments to the focus ring as well. All right, here we are looking at some of the display settings. You see I keep changing the camera types because it's likely we have quite a few students in this class. The majority are going to have cameras that are different from each other. So this is the back of a newer body, and I believe this is a Canon SLR Rebel series. You see that we're looking at the back display. That's accessed by pushing this button up on top, display. You see these settings up here, which we'll start to learn inside and out. We have shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, and how they're represented. Again, something we'll be talking about later this week as well. Our shutter speed is set as a fraction. Aperture is set as a f-stop number, sometimes with a decimal point in there, and then ISO ranging typically anywhere from 100 up to in the 32,000s. Shooting mode. Yours will never say P. For this class, it will always say M, indicating that you have this top dial up here set to manual. All right, I found something to reference the autofocus versus manual focus, as well as something else we should talk about. So we will be shooting, again, you have the option, you can shoot on manual focus and as well as autofocus. The body of your camera is going to have this option, as well as the lens. I would set them so they are equal on both parts. So if you have your body of your camera set to autofocus, which is that AF, also set the lens of your camera to AF as well. Below it, it may say image stabilization, stabilizer, vibration reduction. I think it's always helpful to switch that on. So turn that over. And again, that's just I can say a newer feature on the DSLR cameras that helps stabilize your images and to help ward off any sort of shake that may come from hand holding them or from natural elements such as wind. This next part that we're taking a look at are the focus options. These are most likely in your menu, so I would take some time, pull up that in the menu section. Again, you may find display or have to go ahead and press that menu button. Go in and find that. The suggested starting point if you're a newbie to your DSLR camera is go to the single point. This allows you to select a single point as manual selection of one of these points. I will tell you that when we start talking about composition and the rule of thirds, planning out your images. So if I plan an image where my main focal point is on the upper left of my photograph, I would likely choose a selection point that is currently right here, and it makes sense with my composition. If my main subject matter that I want in focus is in my upper left, but for some reason I have this point right here selected, this will be the main point that my camera chooses to focus on, and it won't make sense for my overall goal. So this is where the planning and selection of your composition is really, really important, and staying away from, I guess, snapshot photography. Rather, we're going to plan these out, and it'll take some time to get used to setting up your camera focal selections and settings, and then again, towards the end of the semester, you'll go a lot faster. But to begin with, since this is we're doing planned photography, image pre-visualization, this is a very important part of it. Next, looking at image quality, and you go into the menu in your camera to find this as well, like on this one, so the menu, and go through the settings until you find image quality. This is typically how they're displayed. You see this little half-arced triangle with an L next to it, and then we have M and S, and they all have different indicators. These are all JPEG images, and they're the lower quality non-RAW images. We will not be capturing in this mode. You'll be capturing with RAW and RAW only. You do have the option of doing RAW plus a JPEG option. I just recommend against that because it basically creates, it duplicates your chances for selecting the wrong image to submit for your projects, and then it additionally takes up extra space on your SD card. Most digital cameras do save JPEG files by default. The way a JPEG image is created, the camera takes all the raw data captured by the sensor, it makes some automatic adjustments, and then it throws away the data it finds unnecessary. RAW files, on the other hand, they store all the data that's captured by the camera, and what this does, it allows for higher quality and more of a range when it comes to your editing. The disadvantage to RAW files is that they're larger and they can typically only be accessed with the proper software. That's what we'll be using in this class. Again, Adobe Photoshop, and then I like the Camera Raw plugin, which is free to download as well. This is going to conclude the basics of our camera mechanics. Remember, for all your projects, you do need to have those set to RAW as well as shooting on manual.